Yo, yo, we in here. Got the so before I rap about what was going on, I got the what's the drink for the stream? The harmless coconut water. And I like this one because the numbers are good and you can't find an actual coconut. Let's show y'all the you see the calorie count is low, but you know, the rest of the nutrition label is cool. But if I have to do coconut water out of a Bible, I mean not out of a Bible. I'm jumping ahead about the subject, right? If I have to do coconut water out of a bottle, this is the one that I get. And of course, they didn't have my Waikia water as they usually have, so I got the one that people are most familiar with, Fiji. And just like with the other waters that I show, if you look at this area right here on the bottom, it's got the nutrition label, the dissolved solids in it, which I always tell people when it comes to you need to run processes in your body, just drink the water. So you got to get the water. But if you're trying to hydrate your body, the water and the minerals have to come together. But all right, getting right into it, because I got to do my photography thing, so I got about an hour. I saw the debate between Enqi and Q Butter, and just so you guys know up front, somebody said they just see a black screen. Can y'all hear me? Do me a favor in the chat. Let me know if y'all can hear me and if y'all can see me. Because I need to know. Someone said they see a black screen, but on my end, all is good. Google me, what's good? The Raiders in the building. Yeah, as far as I can see everything, my picture looks clear. Let me know y'all can see me or if it's black. Somebody said it's a dark screen on theirs. But I'm gonna keep talking if y'all can hear me. Let me know you can hear me too, because hopefully I'm not just talking for nothing. But I saw the debate between Enqi and Q Butter. The subject matter is, a lot of people. I kept hearing a lot of people say, "Okay, good, y'all can hear me, good." I sound muffled to you? That's crazy. Hopefully y'all can hear me though, because when I do this car phone thing, it ain't the greatest quality. I'd rather do it home. Brother says, Snipe says I'm clear. Google me says I'm muffled. So I guess it depends on what you're listening on. All right, jumping right into it. So I saw the debate between Dr. Enqi and Q Butter. Now, for reference, y'all know I use my channel as Dr. Enqi's backup channel. I learn a lot under Dr. Enqi, but it does need to be known. Y'all see that Urban Nerds patch right there. I know who Q Butter is. We took a group of our children from Urban Nerds to the Ziax Institute. So that's going to be very important for y'all to know. I don't hold a biased opinion when it comes to the debate because I respect both being in their own lane, which is a part of me, being a Libra, balance, and all that stuff like that, right? But I saw the debate. It was on Sinetter's channel. Sinetter's channel is known for it, and a lot of people know that he's been doing this debate scene for a long time. So usually you do your debate scene on Sinetter's because you know you're going to get a decent amount of attention. So there may be people who do really good debates on the channel, but it tends to be about the attention and who's willing to put on the actual debate. Okay. I am not always the biggest fan of a debate taking place on Sinetter's channel because for some reason it used to get into a lot of arguments and screaming over top of one another. And I know a lot of people who were associated with Sinetter and who know Sinetter, and that's a lot of people in the conscious community, they know that there's been a change in the way that he handles things on the channel. So it's not perfect, but it is better than it used to be. It used to be really rowdy, the way things would go on the channel. Like it would be a lot of name calling, people taking things personal, and and so on and so forth. So that made me not really the biggest fan, but because I don't really hold personality at the highest level when it comes to me watching things, it's not the biggest thing that I'm worried about when it comes to the channel. So it's on Sinetter's channel. Cool. Okay. The subject of the debate, a lot of people thought was, is God white? That is not what the debate was about. It's a nice question that you can dig into, but that's not what the debate was actually. That's not the title of the debate. So the title of the debate was, is the God of the Bible definition of science, I'm sorry, is is light used in science as a definition the same as the way it is used in the Bible? It's something along those lines, right? We got the word light, how it's used in science, and how it's used in the Bible. Are they the same? That's the question to be answered. I'm going to repeat it again. The topic was about light, and is the definition of light in science and the Bible the same? At the very least, at the end of the debate, you're trying to find out, is that the case or not? Do you believe that is the case? Now, separations. I'm going to tell you where the two of them separate, because when I looked at the debate, I noticed Sinetta put out a poll on who do people think won when I looked at it yesterday. Now, yesterday, I was only about an hour and a half into the video. So I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to click one because I need to go further into the debate and finish watching. As of this live stream, I probably got about 3.5 hours through. It was at the point where people were calling in and asking questions, which at this point, they considered the debate over anyway. So I said, okay, that's enough to do some reactions or whatever. So, Enqi's side of the fence is how to look at light in regards to the Bible, and a lot of people kept pushing it to religion, but really the debate was about the Bible, okay? Enqi was coming from the perspective of understanding what these things actually are. What is light? What is electromagnetism? What is magnetism? What is sound? What is hertz? What is frequency, right? On that side. Q Butter, being an expert, or at least a teacher, I don't want to say how far he goes because I don't have that much info yet, but Q Butter goes as far as looking at direct definitions and usage for perfect science, meaning how do you actually use the process of science to answer equations, figure things out, utilize these things in real life situations. The point of contention in the actual debate was that difference right there. It didn't really seem like the question was getting answered. Okay, here's science over here, in the biblical sense, and then here's science over here. I guess for the sake of Q Butter, in the physics sense or in the science world. His text, SECT, of science is physics. But then you got biology, kinematics, you got all kinds of stuff. His science splits down a bunch of different ways. His specialty is physics. Q Butter deals in the process of utilizing scientific knowledge as it is in the world. So if you use the word science, light, electromagnetism, and all that, these words exist the way that they do so that they can be used in practical application. What Enqi was looking at was the baseline of what they all mean, so to speak. So, to give some examples, right? Jeff, what's going on? To give some examples, in the Bible it says God is light. That scripture exists. But there are tons of examples that you can pull out of the Bible where it says God is knowledge, God is wisdom, and you'll see a lot of people who make claims in the Bible based on the way it's written that because they have this connection with God, wisdom and knowledge has been given to them. So the connection between light and God being light and the imparting of wisdom and knowledge onto people because of who God is in their life exists. That part is easy to prove biblically. Now, there are people who will make the argument the light in the Bible is more towards, like, it's almost like saying personality, the righteousness of a person, right? The way you are in front of people shines a light on the people. The problem is the interpretation changes depending on where you look. So what Enqi did was Enqi went to the Latin definition of science, which I believe is scientia or scientia, however you would pronounce it. Basically the word science, but it's science, but it ends with a TIA. And that definition is knowledge, meaning even if Q Butter says, when I look up the definition of light or the definition of knowledge or the definition of information, this is what it is. Enqi's saying, okay, scroll down. There are multiple definitions, and I'm showing you how one of them is being utilized, which is the one that is knowledge, because the Bible is heavy on light and knowledge and wisdom being put together. So it's not a question to me whether or not the word knowledge being compared to science is showing up in the Bible if we're talking about light and wisdom and knowledge and information and all those things. That is there. Now comes how Q Butter is looking at the situation. Q Butter is looking at the practical application when it is being used. Meaning, if the scientific formula is talking about sound waves if we're talking frequency and the shape of a wave or the shape of particles and things like that, there is a way it is defined and a way it is used in science. So because it is defined and used a certain way, you have to create a separation. Even if the general understanding is light is this thing, sound is this thing. At the end of the day, when you talk about electromagnetic waves, remember electricity, magnetism, when they meet at right angles, photons. So you have light in the mix with them. So those who know certain things like that look at the debate differently. So it's not an issue of can you connect the God of the Bible and light to science. The question you have to ask yourself after you're done a debate is, did Enqi correctly connect and show that the God of the Bible, who is light, and the fact that I can say I know that God and Jesus are presented as someone who bears light, information, knowledge, wisdom, all those things come in a package in the Bible. Okay, I understand that. The question is, how did you look at the debate in terms of how Q Butter put out his answer for science? It is very difficult to say who won a debate because of how different people are looking at it. Like a couple of people said, Q Butter pulled out a stack of books and said, Enqi, where's your stack of books? Okay, if we're pulling out stacks of books, but we're not really flipping to each page and debating over the pages in the book and all that, who wrote it, when it is, and we're not going that deep, then that's kind of, kind of selective. That's kind of up to you. So the general consensus from what I'm seeing is people believe that Q Butter won. Truthfully, a large portion of it was decorum. Decorum, and then you heard stuff like what I said earlier, where it was like, oh, he showed a book. But people were taking times where Enqi didn't do something and making it the whole debate. Oh, you was dodging all the questions and not answering any of the questions. Why? Because of the time where Q Butter said pull out a stack of books and Enqi didn't pull out a stack of books. So they make that the whole debate. So it makes it kind of difficult to take those opinions into account when they're trying to take one thing and say it was the entire thing. Because as much as I can say, okay, he said pull out books and Dr. Enqi didn't pull out the books. Well, at the same time, Enqi defined science using the Latin term, which says knowledge. And if science is about gathering knowledge, and we know experiments in the process of science is about gathering knowledge about a thing, well, there's your connection. You see what I mean? So it's not exactly Google me. So you use the short word, which is skire or skire. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it because I didn't take Latin. But I see you put the scientia, right? And then you put the short part, which is skire or skire, or however you will pronounce it in Latin, which is to know. There is a correlation, at least in the case of the Bible. Now, I can't go to the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, and all these different texts and say, is God described as light? I'm almost certain I'm going to be able to find something about light and wisdom and knowledge in them, but I don't know that. I know for the Bible because I grew up under a Christian family. My mom's side was Christian. My dad's side believed in God, but non-Christian, non-denominational. So that's why I fall in the middle kind of, right? So, but at the same time, Dr. Enqi having a definition of science, which is to know, and me knowing what the Bible says, unless I have a grand audience of scientific people saying, okay, we define science exactly the way you define it, then I don't really know where that debate is going to lie outside of each person individually giving their take on why they believe one person or the other won. So I wasn't really partial to either side. To tell you the truth, I watched the debate because I wanted them both to just literally go in on a scientific topic. Like, I wanted Dr. Enqi to go back to the classic days in Barnes and Noble and at the lectures and stuff where the whiteboard is out and he really just going in and he just talking science and it's so much. You know how y'all say like when people start talking a certain way, it's like, yo, he going in. I wanted it to be just that. Him going in so much is undeniable, at least about the knowledge. Because once you hammer with people with knowledge so much and you start crossing streams with the person you're debating, and it's like, damn, they taking what they're debating about and what the other person's saying, and they breaking it down so well and giving me all this other crazy information that I can comprehend. It's impossible to say you lost because you're hammering it so hard. I don't think either side hammered the knowledge part very well. I think Q Butter did a good job making examples of where his knowledge could go when he was saying things like, oh, the dolphins and the bats, and, can you show the angle of incidence when you do this and that? And then they started talking about fiber optic light. They said, oh, it's mirrors and the reflection of light. No, and then the Wi-Fi. No. That's great. One guy even asked about Hertz in the question and answer section. That would have been a chance to go in. There wasn't a lot of going in the debate, and that was the issue. And I get it. A lot of people were talking about how Enqi would embellish, Dr. Enqi would embellish on his answers. Yeah, like surrounding his answer. But that's his personality, right? I'm expecting that. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I'm expecting it because I know him, right? So I can expect Enqi to be like, see, and this is why he'll answer a question, right? He'll either start and embellish and then answer the question and then embellish more, or he'll answer a question and then embellish. Like he'll do something like, see, light is, and then he'll say what light is, and he'll be like, see, what this person is doing is they're trying to get y'all to do this and do that, and Enqi will embellish and add on all the extra flair and stuff, and the poking fun at and the joke stuff to go around it. That was making a lot of people not like him in the debate. I get it. I can't do anything about how people look at personality, but I understand. It doesn't bother me too much because the most it might make me do is if it happens too much, I might cut something off. Like I'm really just in the mood to gather a bunch of information. And there was like enough contention and me wanting to see if that information was coming out that kept me watching the entire thing, right? So that was my deal about the whole thing. I do feel like Sinetter should not take any sides if he didn't try, if he doesn't believe he did or he didn't mean to. That's not how it came across. I feel like he should have just held the format together. It was good. I like the fact that he was muting when he needed to. That was a good thing to be done, to keep the scrambling and all that stuff from going on. But when you're saying things like, Enqi, you using, you shouldn't be asking questions on this, like telling them how to debate and then saying like, Q Butter got you, and I think you got, and oh, you need to knock out round and all. You don't need that. Let the crowd do that. Or you could give your reactions after the entire debate is over and say what you feel like happened. But during the debate, it's kind of like like a referee in there talking about, man, you need to go get him. And yo, you see, he's doing this and he's doing that. Yo, figure, that I'm not a fan of that. Like, so, that's just the way I feel about watching the debate. And I do know that people are saying that Sinetter's impartial towards a non-religious side. So that could have played some part in the whole thing. But, that is what it is. But in terms of if I were there, I don't have as much info. I'm like in the learning phase in a lot of different things. My area is, they're talking about light. I'm not going to say I can't really go in on light because I'm a photographer. It's my job to know light. The way it is explained in the highest of scientific circles, I'm not going to act like I can bang the hardest there either. But in this debate and in this conversation, there is plenty I could say. If I just happened to be there live and I wasn't just doing my thing with my wife and just chilling, I probably would have came in on the Q&A section. Not to say what I would have asked, because at this point I don't watch the whole debate. I don't know what I would have asked. But when it comes to light, I am a photographer. So if I'm describing light and I'm talking about it in terms of the Bible, if I'm looking at it from Enqi's side, what I am gaining from Enqi's side of explanation is the overall understanding, the shell, the groundwork of a thing. Because from groundwork, you can build up. I can't necessarily become a STEM person going through Q Butter's method up front, because the way he debated the whole thing is kind of like, I'm going to show you how detailed and how deep and how many sections it is so much. it kind of can scare a person away. If I come out and start talking about the angle of incidence of light and cosine and tangent and all, and I start hitting you with all these things. So if you're a beginner and you're trying to understand and you're trying to really get into it and then climb your way up, I can look at Enqi's side from that. Look, light. I'm finding you a definition of light in terms of knowledge, information connected to the word science. Light is a way of carrying information. Now remember, it can be transformed, stepped up, stepped down, and all those things. But I'm going to now, so now at this point, I'm going to give you guys my point of view. So let me step to the side. I'm going to talk about light, but I'm going to step away from the debate for a second. In the beginning, there was darkness. Some people will use the word Big Bang, or you'll hear something like that was the word, which some people will say, oh, that's a sound. In Q Butter's world, you have to define and show sound as a thing so it can be used. You have to define and show light as a thing so it can be used. Okay? You have to differentiate, even if there's something that unifies them. With Enqi, he's talking about unification regardless of differentiation. You have to understand the difference of the way they're coming across. So, in my world, if there is a darkness, which really is not a true darkness when we're talking about God, at least from my perspective, when we're talking about God. Darkness is like primordial waters. It's a saturation of frequencies to the point where it returns dark again. Part of the arguments they were having was about visible spectrum light. The electromagnetic spectrum has a certain body to it, so to speak. Like it contains things that are electromagnetic. Q Butter made it a point to talk about the tiny portion in the middle, which is the visible spectrum. The problem is saying that this light is the visible spectrum, meaning it is a light that can be seen. It has nothing to do with light that cannot be seen. Hence, electromagnetic spectrum. The way to differentiate frequencies and vibrations of electromagnetism. The stronger it gets, we give it a different name. So the different names Q Butter looks at in the argument. The entire thing, versions of light, that's what Enqi is talking about. The electromagnetic spectrum is the seen and unseen light spectrum. No, it is not called the light spectrum. I get it. That's what Q Butter said. Again, he was being technical in terms of using science to produce a physical result. He owns a school. He comes from an atheist point of view. So because of that, he can't just say, well, we're going to make Wi-Fi, fiber optics, sound, speakers, and all that using light. He can't do that. He has to separate the meanings so that they can get into the math and details to produce a result. But when you're learning theory, you can start from the groundwork and say, oh, these are all forms of light. Why? Because they're all disturbances of what I would call God or the all. When you have the great darkness, the great stillness, when you disturb it, you create a movement, and that movement must be given a name. In the beginning, there was the word, which means the initial type of light was called the word, which is enough disturbance to cause sound. When your ears hear sound, the sound vibration ripples through the air, strikes either hair, bone, or water inside your ear, which creates an electrical signal, which is a translation of the disturbance, and it is decoded for you to utilize it. Hence, it being knowledge. A frequency is a form of knowledge. Your senses is different ways you react with the frequency. If you touch something, you create friction, which is a form of disturbance. That creates a form of light. Can you see it? No. It is a disturbance. It causes a frequency. If you listen closely enough, it can be heard. Even if I tap very softly, if your ears and your acoustics are good enough, you can hear it, which means that sound can be decoded to mean something. If I were to speak like I'm doing right now, I'm creating ripple vibrations in the air. If they go far enough because I'm pushing them hard enough, those will strike the ear and create the same process. But then there's the things that I can't touch and feel. There are the things that I can see that I can't touch and feel, like the sun. I can't touch and feel it. I kill my damn self. But I look at the sun. I'm gathering light into the eye. And because of the sun, it produces enough electromagnetic radiation where other things get illuminated around it so that you can see it. Someone had to see a tree, leaves, grass, and everything to give it a name, right? That's knowledge. The vibrations frequency within the earth are for you to interact with, for you to gain knowledge on how to interface with the environment. If you advance that and give everything different names of that light, then you come up with things like the electromagnetic spectrum, which is your ability to call each frequency a different thing. That's why there is visible light, gamma rays, UV rays, radio waves, microwaves, and different types of waves. And then you have the particle form of it. When electricity and magnetism meet at right angles, you can have a photon, which is light, which is a way of meeting them in the middle to package it as knowledge or information. You see what I mean? It can go different ways. The question is, how do you see it when you listen to the debate? Can I give Enqi the win? Because to me, he successfully correlated science and the Bible and the definition of science, light, and the Bible to be utilized equally across the board. I could do that, but I don't think most people will do that, because when you're trying to debate a scientist, it's almost like when you say, "Does the Bible define light the same way as scientists do?" It's almost like you're deferring to the scientists. So you're saying the scientists have a definition of how they use light, and you're saying, I believe that the Bible is talking about the exact same thing. If you believe Enqi successfully did that by listening, not by favoritism, by personality, which you liked and which you hated, just by purely listening to his response to the questions, do you feel like you got that? That determines Enqi the winner. If you don't feel like you got that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to say that Q Butter is the winner. But one thing Q Butter did do was he was establishing the different ways to break down the electromagnetic spectrum. I don't think that Q Butter successfully said that we don't define it like the Bible does. He spent more time trying to say that Enqi was creating a new definition by interpolating, metalepsis, these different terminologies to make it sound like he's just making something in the Bible fit the definition of science when it doesn't. Now, to his point though, if somebody asks when they say God is light in the Bible, was the Bible saying electromagnetism? That's not going to win a debate, because people are going to be like, when I read the Bible and I interpret that word, I'm not coming up with the word electromagnetism. So I get it. People would say that. But at the same time, if they said God is light, and Enqi takes the word science and defines it as to know things, and science's job is to conduct experiments in order to know things, and then light carries information, and he successfully did that, well, there you go. So this is what I'm talking about. Enqi used to talk a lot about crowds of people who don't understand the subject matter or what is being talked about, defining who the winner of that subject matter is. When you have a debate, the best thing you could have in a debate is other scholars who are on the level you're on looking at both people debate so that they can make a decision on it, because that's their world. When you have a bunch of people who are not in that world trying to do it, then you have to successfully be able to bring them in that world. Based on what I'm hearing people say about the debate, it doesn't sound like either side was able to bring the people into the world. It sounded more like it was like, who do I like more? Because to bring us into that world would make us feel like you have like a childlike nature in terms of your explanation. Like, oh man, I'm going to show people how the God of the Bible defines light the same way scientists do. And I'm going to get to spill out all this information and all these facts and all this stuff like that. It's like you're supposed to, when it's your turn to speak and ask questions, y'all supposed to kind of have a handshake kind of thing going on. Like, oh, I got this info and this info and that info. But really what it was it sounded like it was like Enqi was answering questions and banging on Q Butter. Q Butter was just like, I'm gonna hold my composure, but I'm gonna keep defining these two words as if Enqi is trying to interpolate and base his whole argument on that. And it's like, well, no, because to me, I think Enqi successfully got away from the whole, oh, he's just trying to curb the definition to fit. Even though I'm not a fan of the electromagnetic explanation of is God is light, he had tons of other explanations that fit the situation much better. So that's kind of how I looked at the entire thing. So for me, God is light. In the Bible, it is defined many times, or at least to the point it's ad nauseum. You're constantly finding out how whenever God shows up and people are embellishing on God, you're constantly hearing things about wisdom, especially if you read Proverbs. Because even in Proverbs, and I understand, for those who know the Bible, Proverbs is the words of a king, I believe, to his son about ways to be wise. And he uses wisdom in terms of a sheep, like it's explained as a sheep. I get it, but I'm just saying, in the Bible, when you see God making references, God is light, there's only one who is righteous, and then you'll see people talking about I am with God, and because of God, I have wisdom and I have knowledge, and you'll see a bunch of scriptures like that. It's very easy to search for. So you have light. Light is a form of information. Ion is another word for light. I've explained in the past when you look at words that have to do with light, they correlate regardless of which way you look at it, if you're looking at sound or if you're looking at pictures. For instance, information, inside, format, ion, right? Inside, format, the shape of a thing, ion. So it's like saying the inside format. You're basically shaping your body with information. You're formatting your body with ions, with light. That's one way to look at it. Okay, imagination or image nation, right? Images within the nation, right? You still have the letters ION at the end. So light using pictures. Dictionary, diction, to speak. Dictionary, a place, you have that ION in there again. You have that light in there. You have diction, the ability to speak. What am I speaking? Light? The dictionary, a place where light is spoken or light can be read, right? So you have these words that have the ION or the word light in them. Etymology exists for a reason. It's almost like if people really wanted to go hardcore and study light, they would find out that a lot of the backbone of our entire world is built on the definition of light. And eventually we kind of stack things from there, because as we go along in the future, we're just separating things down more and more. The puzzle that was once 100 pieces got cut into 1,000 pieces and constantly gets reassembled again. And that's why science keeps changing, because we have to rename things to keep the differences of things separated, even if they have like qualities, right? So for Q Butter to act like the way Enqi was defining light was wrong, I think that was just to save face and not give Enqi any credit. But at the same time, that doesn't stop me from respecting the way he sees the definition of light. It's just the fact that he was trying to deny the fact that Enqi was drawing a solid correlation. His definitions were correct. His correlation was correct. He wouldn't give him that. He just kept trying to say that he was mixing and twisting the words and stuff. But again, from a man of physics, a man of science, a man who's not of God, in a debate, he's just trying to figure out how not to make any connections with the opposite side, because it could come across as a loss. You see what I mean? So it's almost like the debate was used to make, it's almost like people, I didn't get that feeling I normally get, right, in a debate, where I feel like somebody's trying to walk away and look really good. I don't feel like either side put forth enough energy where I feel like, oh man, this person's career is on the line and all that. It didn't feel like it had any of that attached to it. So the energy didn't really come from that. The energy for this debate was really about what was you going to learn. And I think anyone who came there just to say, let me see if I feel like my man's represented me, well, they came there to do what they do, because that's what always happens. So that's not really my way. I mentioned, like, I'm about to go do photography now. So I'll throw some science y'all way, right? Like, I'm a photographer. I have a camera. Cameras work by light. They have a lens. Your eye has a lens. When light shines through the eye, the shape of the eye causes the light to refract a certain way. Now, where does darkness come in that? You have a melanated internal surface of your eye to keep light rays from scattering outside of it so you don't see pictures incorrectly. So what happens is the light comes through the retina. You have these rods and cones. Cones, think of color. Rods, think of luminosity, meaning how bright does it get. Because again, visible spectrum. So you need, how bright it gets will determine whether the visible spectrum that you have as a human being can actually interact with it through your eyes. Some things cannot be seen. So the only other way to interact with it is another part of the body, or you can't interact with it, right? You might have to touch it. You might have to taste it. There are some things you can't see. That does not mean information is not involved in it, because when you taste things, you gather information about it. It's a form of vibration, a form of frequency, hence a form of knowledge, which means it's a type of science. And if it is a type of electromagnetism, meeting at right angles, photon, light, the carrier of the information. The receipt of that information is what your body is for. How to interact to receive that information. When I take pictures with my camera, I capture information by having enough visible light in the atmosphere. The light shines through the lens just like it shines through my eye. There is a chip on the opposite side that begins to, because the light's coming through, producing a type of electromagnetic radiation. It vibrates that chip and starts to make the electricity of each, what we call bucket on that chip, fill up. And the chip has different patterns, but it's red, green, blue, and it's in a Bayer pattern in most cases. So that just means it looks like a big checkerboard of red, green, blue. And depending on what light is coming in from different frequencies, that bucket's going to fill up more and more. If you don't fill it up enough, you can't see what you shot. It's not enough light, not enough information gathered. If you shoot and hold on for too long, it's going to overfill it, which means it's going to turn white, which means you can't differentiate the colors of it. But light is involved because photography is utilizing light to shape a thing. Okay? So a lot of technology is using light because of vibration. The disturbance, we take it back to the beginning of the scientific information. You have the nothingness. A disturbance of that nothingness explodes out into space. Space now is a something. A disturbance happened and something exists. When these explosion of parts happen, it's trying to recycle and collapse back into itself to inertia. The process of moving back into itself is called force and motion. So the explosion out, force and motion. I'm sorry, I got to explain that the opposite way, right? So you got force and motion, forcing out, and acceleration back to inertia, which is the point where two sides of a thing meet in the middle, and there's no disturbance anymore. The problem is in the universe, there's constant disturbances. So space is always being created. That's why the universe is ever expanding. So when you create space, that return, now we're going to change what we're talking about. This is the kind of thing that Q Butter wanted people to know. So that explosion out, you can call it Big Bang, God's first word, you call it whatever you want. But that explosion out creates space. And within that space, as the space tries to contract, science originally called that gravity, but that's called magnetism. See, that's why when you look at the toroid shape, that's that explosion out I'm telling you about. That's spiraling out, donut shape, and it spirals back in. The spiraling back in that they call gravity, or curved space-time. Y'all heard that in the debate. That's the part that's being called gravity, which actually is acceleration back to inertia, which is the magnetic field. Okay? So once you have the magnetic field, you can have magnetic reactions from thing to thing, which is why we are electric beings. The electricity, the frequencies that we put out, the disturbances that we create, have magnetism attached to it. That's the whole thing. Electromagnetism is a form of radiation going on with all types of disturbances. Low frequency disturbances don't have a lot of radiation they put out. High frequency disturbances do. That would be on the gamma, UV radiation side. On the lower side, the ones that people tell you not to worry about, small microwaves, radio waves, stuff like that, the whole 5G thing, where one side people are telling you to be careful because of the hertz or cycles per second. And the other side of the spectrum where people are telling you, well, you shouldn't have to worry about it because the frequency is not high enough to really do anything to you. And then people get into arguments over that. The scientists, the people not scientists, we get into arguments over that. So I'm saying all these things to say that within the debate, I would say that it's best if you designate your winner on the information the person gave out to prove their point. I think the way that the title rolls off, the key was to decide whether or not, so science has its definition of light. The key is, does the Bible sound the exact same way? When you heard Enqi speak, did it sound like the Bible was talking about science the same way that the scientists, was the Bible talking about light the same way the scientific community was? If he did not do that, then Enqi would be the loser. It is what it is. Does that mean Enqi's explanation of light was bad? No, it didn't show that he didn't know science, he didn't know what he was talking about, it had nothing to do with that. The simple question is, science defines light this way. Do you believe Dr. Enqi showed that the Bible describes it the same way? Meaning, are they interchangeable? When you hear it in the Bible, is it like you're hearing it in science? That was the goal. That's what the original, it wasn't, is God light? That's not what the topic was. People kept saying, is God light? And Enqi had to remind people that's not what the topic was. Okay, so that's the question right there. But at the same time, on Q Butter's side, I don't know if you want to call it like he just got the relaxed thing. It was his job to define science's definition of light. I think the problem was he kept saying things and defining things, but ignoring what Enqi was saying. So we didn't get much of a rebuttal. The rebuttal kept being repeated. We kept getting the same interpretation, metalepsis and interpolation, constantly repeating the same thing when the person has already negated that response doesn't put you ahead. It just made us stay stagnant for the rest of the debate, because now it's like people couldn't hear Enqi as much because he gave information, he didn't hammer the information. It's like you can remember more of him just banging on Q Butter, but not necessarily taking into account what he was saying. It's like you can remember that more than the information that Dr. Enqi was giving. Q Butter was pretty much seemed like he was just angling more towards ignoring Enqi and sticking to the subject of metalepsis and interpolation, which he should have gotten away from at a certain point, because it's like Enqi is gaining ground because he's actually defining what he's talking about. He's just not doing it heavily. So it was for that type of debate and what it could have been, it was a flawed debate. And it didn't help that Sinetta was kind of making it seem like he just kept leaning, he kept showing his emotion and leaning it towards Q Butter. If it was correct, it wouldn't have mattered. The thing is, as the person who's running the debate, you got to hold off on that. You can talk reactions and all that when they off stream and it's finished, like, yo, I ain't gonna hold y'all. When that joint was over, this is who I think won and here's why. That's more of the way you should do it if you're the person who's actually doing it, right? So this is pretty much my take on the entire debate. That's my take on the entire debate. I haven't even decided who really won yet, because the problem is, like I said, I saw exactly at the end of the debate, I know what Q Butter said, what his goal was. I know what Dr. Enqi said, and I know what his goal was. But I don't believe either side hammered it, due to whatever flaws was in the debate. Like I said, I think Dr. Enqi embellished too much. So it's more memorable what he was doing to kind of make it sound like he was trying to embarrass Q Butter versus really hammering the info and being who we know Dr. Enqi can be. So that's the flaw on that side. Q Butter's side, it's like you rambled about all these different types of science, read off a couple definitions, showed off some books and stuff. So you proved that you are a scientific man, but you didn't make us walk away with practical application of science. You made us walk away thinking that science is too damn complicated to get into, and I gotta just want it. You see what I mean? Because when you start talking about things too far-fetched, like I said, when you start talking about the incidence of reflection and cosine tangent, well, I never took calculus. The highest I've ever taken is geometry. So I don't know trig or calculus. It would help me to learn them, but I'm a damn good photographer and I don't use trig or calculus. You see what I mean? So I do what I do. And if I find a use for those things one day, I'll use them. So it would have been to the benefit of Q Butter to give, if children were to watch this debate one day, they have to see the magic of science and the way he defines it and want to get into it. We tend to jump to the end game and say what we should be involved in as a people, but we don't deal with the energy that makes us want to get into it. That's literally what makes me get involved with Urban Nerd. I'm taking the more complicated stuff. And if y'all are ever around when we have these trips with the children, and you see the way I explain things and show them things, I'm trying to show them that fantasy, that magic that comes with I'm not telling you to learn math so that you can count change at the store. I get that. But teachers use that as the example that's supposed to make children hype, and it doesn't. It's like, okay, I mean, count change at the store, what? But if I start saying things like, young man, I mean, you do know you can make a car fly one day. What you talking about? And then I show them quantum locking technology right in front of their face. Like, yeah, look at this thing right here. You notice it's not touching the ground? Yeah, I'm put this in this position right here, tap that thing and let it swing on around like that, and I'm gonna move it over here and under, and I'm gonna lock it right there and do that. You see the principle that makes this work? Young man, you can learn this at your age. I always tell the children, you do not have to be an adult to make really good technology. There was kids over in Africa who took broken radios and said, yo, I'm gonna improve. Like, I think someone stole an iPhone prototype, took some extra materials and stuff, and improved the design of it. You see what I mean? And they weren't even more than 16. So I don't care if you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The magic of technology is to make magic happen in front of people's eyes. Things people did not think is possible. And if I make them think it's 25 years of studying and a bunch of money being thrown into a school, some kids want that so bad that they like, all right, I feel like I can get there faster. I feel like I can do it. I can really do something. Or they have something small they love right now and they feel like it can only get better. Those kids go into science and stick with it because it's just them, right? But if we need more people in our community to get into the sciences, into STEM, they have to feel the magic of it. This happens in music. Y'all always wonder why, oh, this music ain't really saying nothing. Why they playing this music? Listen to the lyrics, this and that. Makes them feel a certain way. It's constantly being pumped in front of their face to go with the clothing and the chains and the garb and all this stuff like that. We're constantly pumping these things out to our community that are negative, but we put all the energy behind it to make it look good. You might be a parent that says, why are you listening to that music and all that stuff like that? That's bad for you. But you might also be the person watching the red carpet events for the award ceremonies for the music and admiring the clothing and what they can buy. So you're helping to support the same thing you're saying you're against. So again, if we're going to be on these platforms, we have to capture the magic of STEM and feed it to the public to make them want it just as bad as the things we don't want them to want because it destroys our community. So if energy can be put into the negative things and make people want it, I'm not going to take that and say, man, people just going to be negative. That's how it is. I'm feeding the energy as if things that are negative will always have more energy than things that are positive. And really, there's a balance of scales. If you don't put the energy into saying, I'm going to make this look great, look fun, and if you don't know how, just do like I do. Take time to see if you can figure out the formula that makes it work. When I get a couple of kids and children in front of me, I can make that magic happen. But it's hard to do it out here on social media, just saying it, because the moment I open my mouth one thing real quick and I can't get my point across faster than TikTok, they're already out the door. So I have to figure out how to make that magic happen to a young person or even to some adults to make them want to get invested in STEM and things that make our community look better. I have to be able to do that quick. That's the problem to be solved for me. It is what it is. Because like I said, if the negative stuff can be done, and the whole world can take that on and we can agree with it, then there has to be a positive side that goes with it. That's just my thinking. So that's what it is, people. For those who, I don't know if y'all have any questions or anything like that, but I just wanted to give my take on the debate and my thoughts on things concerning and around it. I don't have a winner of the debate in terms of there's something about both sides where they did get a point across, but there wasn't enough of it. I feel like that debate could be round two, and then all the flaws could be fixed. And then at that point, we can really dig in deep and see more details and see the magic of each side of the argument, where they can walk away and be like, yo, I appreciate your point of view and walk away. But, Q Butter is a teacher. I went to his school. I've seen him physically making things happen in front of children's eyes in his school. Can't take that away from him. So anything Enqi could say in the debate to try and discredit him as a teacher would hurt our community more than help it. Why? Because at the very least, with what he knows, he goes and gets a valid result off of it. And that's not to say Dr. Enqi doesn't. It's just the fact that if Dr. Enqi does it and Q Butter does it, you don't want to tear that apart. So you can have the debate without tearing the man and his and what he does down, because Q Butter don't fit into that. At least as far as I know, he don't fit into the circle of people who's doing something that tears the community down. He's doing something that actually builds it up. So you don't want to use language like, and you a teacher, and you this and that, and I'm surprised you this and that. Whether you think it's true or not, or if you got to get the truth out of it, regardless of how you look at it, that's off camera. That's not on camera. Because again, I've been to his school. I've seen what the man can produce with these children. So that is literally that is a stepping stone to where we need to be in terms of what they're both debating about, where us as a people need to be concerning STEM. He actually put a step in process that says, yo, You come to my school, you coming out this thing knowing something about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We got to play with the remote radio cars and stuff that he had in there. They got to use the popsicle sticks as kids to build up, makeshift buildings and parts and stuff like that. He had dissection materials inside one of the side classrooms. These things were there. Again, the debate did not shed light on much. It wasn't the informational powerhouse that it should have been. Q Butter didn't listen and kept things a little too complicated. And I think people took that complication and that reservedness of him not resorting to, name calling and stuff like that. They took that as the side of a win. And it's like, okay, that shows good decorum. That doesn't necessarily make it the win. And on Dr. Enqi's side, it's like, dude, everyone knows how much you know. So the fact that you didn't take majority of your time and hammer multitudes of science down people's throat like you normally do, that rubbed a lot of people in the wrong way and say, Q Butter. You see what I mean? That's what it was. They didn't get a chance to really pay attention to the info because there was too much embellishing. You see what I mean? So, I wouldn't hold you. Google me, and I would be dead true. If I knew I could draw the proper crowd, because at the end of the day, I know it's important that you can get a crowd, and Sinetter can do that. That's the plus there. You can draw 1,500 plus in that crowd when it comes to a certain debate. So that's the part he has. If I host the debate on Urban Nerds, they would just have to want to do it, and then we would have to push it, or it would just have to be promoted so well we can get a lot of people to come in to see it. And I'm the type who would have a discussion, Sinetter does this, but I'm the type who would have a private discussion between the two of them on how the debate should go, and then bring them together and have that same discussion about rules and talking parameters and stuff like that. And then my job is to stay out of it. But it also, because I understand the subjects to a certain extent, I can ask more sophisticated questions. And then I can bring in people from the outside and make sure they have, or just have them prepare questions in advance, questions that people wanted to know. I don't mind that people called in to ask questions, but a lot of them were taking it as a chance to advertise for themselves to get into a debate race, or to show off that they clearly favored one side or the other. So that didn't really help that out. And that tends to happen on Sinetter's channel because they're used to the years where he allowed the raw and uncut banging on each other. And there was a time where that was exciting because there was so much new information to give out when people did bang on each other. That information was so, it was constantly coming out. It was info after info after info after info. And they were debating constantly higher level topics. Well, if this person in this age of the world did this, and this person in the age of the world, well, how you going to say that? Because they actually had a subject they were dealing with, and they weren't just mentioning the subject, but talking about everything else about each other around it. That existed, but it felt like they were hammering the information so much. You could lean that to the side for the sake of like, yo, they banging on each other, and I hate the yelling over each other, but man, they got some information to give, and I want to hear it. And I feel like in this debate, that didn't happen. And it could happen, and I think that's in the future what should be aimed for. That's what I think. You see what I mean? You say now Q Butter lost, and I'm like I said, I can't say whether Q Butter lost because the people, because Sinetter was going by the people, and of course his own point of view because he made that obvious up front. The question, I feel like the way that the debate is asked is as if they're saying science has this definition. Does the Bible look at light the same way these scientists do? The way the question is asked, I feel like the burden of proof was put on Enqi to say, like, Enqi, them dudes over there define science this way. Show us all. He would have to have shown us all the people who are validating, not just the definitions that they both took out of the book. He would have to show us how to science. He would have to somehow make us think in the crowd, like, wow, this is how scientists define light. Okay, Enqi, what you going to do about it? We have to be made to feel that because that's the way it was written up. And then Enqi will say, okay, now that I've established that the scientific community looks at like this exact way, I'm going to show you how the Bible does the exact same thing. That would have been it. Q Butter's job would have been to hold steady the definition of science and scrutinize whether Enqi is matching up to it or not. But I don't feel like he could do that because he was too busy saying he's interpolating metalepsis and It's like he was ignoring the fact that Enqi was answering questions, like when he gave the definition of science in Latin, which is to know, which is knowledge. And I know if I were a host without saying it, I could say later on, I could say Q butter. Enqi took the Latin definition of science, which means to know. And we know the entire process of science is a process of things you do to gain knowledge about a certain subject. And this knowledge is constantly advancing, so it can constantly change. So if it's about knowledge, you know, do you agree? First of all, is it about knowledge? If he says no, it's not about knowledge, then now he has to convince us that science has defined science a different way. Because remember, we got to get to the definition of science and then move into definition of light. So once we agree on what science is and the process of science, now we can use that definition and process of science to say, what is light? Does it follow the definition and processes on the science side? And can Enqi prove that the Bible holds it true on the opposite end? And if y'all come out seeing all of that and say, damn, I'm convinced that with everything that they agreed on about the definition of science and the way light is described, Enqi clearly pointed that out in the Bible and showed it to us. Okay, then you can say Enqi won. But at the same time, if Enqi's trying to move the steps forward by saying, here's how science is defined. Okay, Q buddy, you're saying that electromagnetism is not light except for the visible spectrum, but I'm showing you right here in the definition that it is. And Q buddy's like, no, he's using metalepsis and he's using interpolation. It's like it's being ignored, so we can't even step the conversation forward. So whereas Q butter did not establish, so to speak, Enqi wasn't able to punch. It's almost like they had to work off one another. Enqi had to get Q butter to establish a working definition of light and science. And then after establishing that, now remember, Q butter ain't gonna be quick to agree. So Enqi needed a bunch of examples of strong scientists to show to put Q butter in a position that says, yo, Enqi just showed you physicists, scientists, biochemists, and all that who define light a certain way and science a certain way. You better be careful if you're going to disagree with him. Who are you to stand against all of those people? So now Enqi has him trapped in a bubble of define science and define light. Now he can walk into the Bible and say, this is how I'm going to, now I'm going to land the blow by showing how I compare the Bible to those definitions that I've set, that I've managed to get Q butter to fall into kind of like a jail cell of. Like I locked you because I had other people in your community say this who have very strong opinions. If you deny it, I could hammer you about that and win a debate off the fact that now I'm going to work off a definition that's popular that you don't agree with. You see, he could have worked it that way. We never made it that far. And Q butter could have literally just said, like, look, I know the definition of science within the scientific community. And the one that I hold is related to the ones that's popular in the scientific community. And I'm sorry, you're going to have to show me where God matches that definition. Here's the thing. If Q butter would have walked away and said, you know what? Enqi has proven this to me. That's not really a loss. You just proved to me a perspective on religion that I never had. My lane is not religion. I don't lose here. I'm just here to see, like, have you found something nobody else found? So literally, Q butter could have been cool regardless of what happened in there if he'd have just held his ground and stayed cordial and literally just rolled with the punches according to what he already knew. Dr. Enqi actually had the burden of proof because it's a crazy thing to say when you say that the definition of light in the Bible is the same as the definition of light in science. That claim has been made because religion is looked at as a separate thing, and we're looking at science to scrutinizing it to a high level because of what it can do in society. It's a big statement to say, yo, trying to tell me you're going to define it like it is in the Bible. So I felt like Enqi had the magic in his hand. But unless he could get Q butter to conform to that magic, then his argument really doesn't hold any place. And Q butter, by ignoring the parts that Enqi did use to move the conversation forward, and he didn't really help that out, that didn't really help him either. I hope this makes sense. You know, y'all can let me know if it makes sense. But that's what I believe should have happened. It should have been establishment and then discussions on things that have been established. And then Q butter could have came out like, okay, you sound like you're working on something here. I want to ask you questions to see if I can align what you're saying. If it is correct, I'm going to say, okay, are you saying this, Enqi? Because the definition of science is this. Are you saying this? Yeah, that is what I'm saying. Okay, we're moving forward. It sounds like you're really on to something here. I'm going to ask these questions. And when Q Butter gets to the end of his questions and say, I have asked, and when he believes I've asked enough questions, I know science. Enqi knows God in the Bible. I have asked this man many questions, and when I take in his answers and I look at the definition of science, I can say, you know what, brother? Based on what you have told me and what I know about science, I'm establishing that what you say is fact. This was a very good debate, and move on with your life. You don't lose that. You make yourself actually stand more as like a grandfather or godfather over the scientific community. But when you just say, you just sound like you're not accepting anything outside of what you already got, that negates scientific process automatically because we can't have a discussion. You see what I mean? Because if you're not bringing in any information about religion, except I don't know anywhere in these books where it says this about light and stuff like that, all right, well, then you should come in with information about all the books and try and convince the crowd up front. Look, I went through all the books, and even though I see words about light, it is not anything that correlates to this definition over here about science. He could have came at it from that angle. But he didn't do that. He spent more time saying, like, Enqi is going to try and use word salad and word magic and metalepsis and interpolation, and he stuck to that, even when Enqi was giving an exact answer that he should have been looking for. So we couldn't grow. We couldn't build, right, Premier Pouncey? We couldn't build from there. So at the end of the day, unless if you ask me, if you ask me the little bit of information that came out of a 4.5-hour debate, so in 4.5 hours, it wasn't a lot of information. Maybe I'm saying that from someone who has a little bit of a higher study level, being that, you know, a hobby of mine is to look at biochemistry and science and physics and all that. I'm not a master of any of this stuff. I just have an understanding that says when I see a debate, I know what the fuck's going on. So that's the perception that I'm coming from. And I don't have to know the highest level of what both of them are talking about, because once it reaches that point, now I'm interested. And I'm like, well, because I have a baseline understanding, now you're bringing me into your world of expertise. And the moment you try and do that, I can look at you and say, okay, I can define winners and proper information off the fact you're building off of a foundation that's already sound, meaning now I can look at things as, wow, that makes sense. Now, if y'all both make sense, that's where I can come in and say, okay, this is a question round. I'm going to ask you questions, and then the crowd will ask questions because they might have ones I didn't ask. And I'm going to ask questions like, look, I know things up to this point. Y'all started saying some things where both sides sounded plausible, and y'all both seem to really be studied. So now I'm going to ask you a question that says, how does what you say align with the baselines of what we know about science? What you say aligns with the baselines? And then we can measure what sounds like it's more useful as we move along in the community. Or at least we can hold that info so that when we start doing science on our own, we can say, ooh, I have this problem in my science, and I feel like what this brother said is a way I can kind of mess with this stuff to get me further along. And now I can test what I have heard. I have to feel like that when I'm walking away from an intellectual debate. Both men, at the end of the day, in my conclusion, y'all, both men are capable of a high intellectual conversation. It's not a question about that because they both hold a lot of information to do it. This debate wasn't it, though. This should have been the time for chalkboards and whiteboards and fancy interviews and showing technology that people might not have been familiar with. Shoot, we got chat. One dude came in there talking about taking, Sinetter had to come at him, but he was talking about the technology today on the computers can take my voice, and while you talk, you can use the frequency of my voice to sound like me and make me look like an idiot on the internet, and I didn't even say those things. That is true. I know that because I do video editing. So I'm always looking for a way to be up to date on technology. And one of the things you can do is voiceover changes. I can go get a clip of Barack Obama, and it's probably got parameters like, oh, Barack Obama must say words that begin with T and A and all that stuff, because they do that in animation. There's certain vowel and consonant sounds you have to make, like TH and D and B. And when you make enough of those sounds, it knows how all your other words will sound when you start speaking. So now what happens is when I speak, it can measure those same sounds. I don't know if the word's diphthong or whatever, but like I can use my THs and Bs and S's and things like that. And the computer will record my frequency, record Barack Obama's frequency, line them up. And if I want to sound like him, it can it can literally change up the frequencies to align with one another. And now when I talk, it will record back sounding like Barack Obama. That is literally physically possible. Y'all know I love, anyone who hangs around me knows I love talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But if I really want to sound like him, I can go get sound clips of him off YouTube, put it in the software. Start talking, and the software will evaluate my voice and Arnold's voice and take the frequency of Arnold's voice, put it on top of mine, and turn his voice into my words, or vice versa. That is already possible. Y'all seen deepfakes. It could take a scan of your face, a scan of someone else's face, and then scan the environment behind them and match up the color and the lighting and get the entire thing to sync no matter which way you move your head. The only way it probably won't work is if you like turn around or get your head cut off too much from the actual screen. That's technology. That's the power of technology. And if you want to know how far behind your community is, of all just these little things I just talked about, voice changeovers and stuff like that, ask yourself how many people in your community could either build software or a machine that can do exactly what I said. Because we leave it as, and don't get me wrong, these things are good. Plumbing, electronics, construction work, real estate, selling of clothes and stuff like that. Those are things that are far easier to do than learning how to build a phone, a TV, internet, a Titantron that shows the score and stuff like that. That's just the reality of it. The thing is, what we do in the simple to make money, we can make a lot more of it if we focus on one necessity, one item that the entire world needs, and we take our STEM-based people and we build those items, and now money is in the community because science runs the world. Urban nerds, baby. That is what we talk about over here. We're trying to get our children involved in the thing that's going to run the world in the future. Because when your ability to write articles, to make clothing, to sit at a desk and scrutinize numbers and a marketing plan and stuff like that, when all those baseline jobs that are skills that are outside of difficult STEM-based technology get taken over by technology, what do you have left? Oh, I'm a designer. Look what they're doing. I'm a photographer. Look what they're doing in photography. Take a picture with yourself like 6 to 10 ways on your phone. Find a photo that looks a certain way and then tell it to run the algorithm. And now it'll take that photo you took, reshape it, re-angle it, and make you look like an Egyptian king with the proper lighting that you asked for. Because the job now is to know how to write the code to make it do it. Technology gets people the hell out of there. Emotions try and make it stick around, and it'll hang out to a degree. Like there's still commissioned artists, but there was far more commissioned artists when there wasn't printers and copiers and Photoshop. More artists got hired because they were good by hand. That's all they had. But eventually they got outsourced. I'm a fine artist, but I moved up to graphic design because computers came out. And when graphic design started to get saturated, I moved into photography. Photography got saturated, I moved into videography. Videography got saturated, I moved into movie making and animation. Now I'm moving into artificial programming of those same things. You see what I mean? Keeping up with the technology, because the moment I fall behind, now I got to get mad because I want people to just want me to be useful for a thing. They have no use for me at all, which means when the money crunch comes in and you can't spend it everywhere, you got to spend it on necessities. I would no longer be a necessity if I don't keep up. See what I mean? So with that being said, people, I got to make moves. You're getting into software engineering now, working on using my automotive. Hell yeah, because I got a background in automotive, a little bit in soldering from when I was in high school. I didn't switch up because I did a lot of artwork too. I didn't switch up till I went to college. And by you having that, remember, if you're doing software engineering, that means whatever gets built, even if a machine built it, somebody got to program that joint. Somebody got to fix the code. If we have a Terminator situation and you wind up in front of a terminal to be able to reprogram that thing, you can do it. You see what I mean? So, yes, the ability, maybe it's taking away our ability to do manual things. But the thing that programs it to do the manual things, that area, that lane's wide open there. So IT, coding, programming, y'all notice there's a lot of coding camps coming out. A lot of children are being offered it. That's what the game is now. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that I got my point across. Yes, right, Google me. They call it deepfake. I thank y'all for coming out. Leave me some comments in the chat. If y'all think a certain person won and y'all know why, go ahead and say it. Let me know what y'all opinion is. Put that stuff down in the chat. I wish I could have been home to do a little more. I would have had like sound effects and craziness going on the live stream. But I'm out and about, a lot of running around lately. Getting work done. So y'all enjoy the rest of the night. Like I said, I thank y'all for coming out. Remember to follow me on @MarvinHealthAndArts over on Instagram. That's where you would go if anything went wrong with the channel. You would find an answer to what's going on over there. Because the rules are changing on YouTube again. So if there's strikes and stuff that come down the pipe, and my channel gets taken away because of videos I made 5 years ago, and I don't know, then y'all gonna need a way to communicate, and it'll be on Instagram. So that's how you can do it there. You also have the Urban Nerds Worldwide YouTube page. Follow that one, right? Urban Nerds Worldwide. You'll see the logo. A new video is up over there. I put it up about a week ago. Young Thomas, brother George Macon's son, we entered him in a Mortal Kombat tournament, and he got shout outs and got to go on stage. And I got a chance to really expose him. He likes the fighting video games, so I really got to expose him to that world of how to compete, how to make money. And like I said, eventually I'll get into how to stream because you can make money that way. So, different ways of doing it. That's what Urban News does. Again, thank y'all for coming out. I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good night.